Hello everyone. Can you see me? Can you hear me? Well, I have a couple of housekeeping announcements to make at the beginning. So I know that there are quite a few participants taking part in this webinar, which makes us all very happy. And I would like to remind you that it is possible to try to interact both with me and with the organizers of this webinar by using that chat window. So if you want to ask a question, or if you want to make a comment, or if I ask you a question and I expect you to respond, then usually I will be talking about this chat window. So I'm just trying to figure out if we have an understanding on this. So if you could please just type hello or yes or I can hear you or whatever in the chat window, I would be very grateful, and that would be a confirmation for me that you know how to use that chat window. I can't see any responses. I'm not sure if I am looking at the right chat window. Yes, okay, great. There are some of you saying hello, hi, everything is okay. So that's very nice. Thank you very much. And I think now we can begin properly. So today we are going to talk about 5 ways of uplifting your teaching, and those 5 ways will actually be connected with technology and specifically with the platform that Masha introduced at the very beginning, that is My English Lab. We will also be talking about 5 ways of actually improving your students' results with the use of this wonderful platform. So to begin with, I would like you to think back a little bit to what happened, for example, last night or maybe a couple of nights ago. And the question that I would like to ask you is, if you can remember your dream, if you dreamed about anything, if you had a dream last night, can you remember what it was? Can you type it in the chat window, please? Did you dream about anything last night or a couple of nights ago? Ala didn't dream about anything, not really. Okay, yes. Yeah, the question that I would like to ask now is if you ever have dreams connected with your profession, with your teaching profession. Well, I must admit, all right, someone had a dream about the forthcoming holiday. Yeah, I guess this is much more interesting than having dreams about, you know, what happens at work. But I must admit that one of the most terrible dreams, nightmares really, that I sometimes have, and it's a recurring nightmare about my job, is that I actually come to the classroom and I realize that I have absolutely nothing to say. This is a real nightmare. I hope this never happens to you. I hope it doesn't happen to me in the middle of this webinar, but I am confident that I have things to say and that they will be interesting to you. But I am beginning this webinar talking about dreams, and I asked you what you dream about because I have the feeling when I talk to my colleagues, to other teachers, that very often in professional terms, the thing that we dream about is actually always the same. We have, yes, I know we have nightmares, but we also have some interesting dreams, some positive dreams, some dreams that give us more energy to work in this profession. And I think quite a few of us actually do dream about better results, because this is what our work is all about. We want our students to receive the best results they can. This is why we can see here in the chat box that someone is dreaming about being as good as it is just possible. But we want to be very good teachers, and we want our students to receive very good results. So this is a good thing, because actually I would like to say that I have very good news for you, because according to research that we have done, using My English Lab actually translates into students' better results. This is a very, very powerful thing to say, and a very, very powerful thing to begin with. So I will have to explain it to you, and I will have to give you all the reasons why we can make such a powerful and bold claim. So there we go. Let's begin with the most, or the sort of most hard evidence that we have to support this claim. So I know that a lot of you are actually teaching your students to take their exams, be that national exams or maybe some international exams. You want your students to do very well at exams, because you know, when you are a teacher, that usually is the case, that sooner or later your students will have to take either a low stake test or a mid stake test, or perhaps a high stake test such as a national exam or an international certificate exam. So if you look at this slide here, you can see that the blue bars represent the results of those students who actually used My English Lab before they took their exams. And here I'm talking about two state exams, which are very, very similar to your OGE and JEGE tests, actually. And you can see quite clearly that students who used My English Lab before the exam, in preparation for the exam, at least for a year, scored about 20% higher in the case of Matura exam than the national average for the exam. And the difference was slightly smaller for the exam that is called gymnasium exam, which is an equivalent of your OGE test. But still, the difference, as you can see, is quite significant. So we did this research about 4 years ago, and we believe that it gives very strong evidence to support the claim that using such tools as My English Lab is actually very, very helpful for students, but also for teachers. Let me explain why it is the case, and I'm going to divide the rest of the presentation into sort of 5 steps. So I'm going to be talking about 5 reasons why the students' results are better, or in other words, 5 ways to actually uplift your teaching to achieve better results from your students. So there we go. Before I start talking about step 1, I just wanted to make sure that everyone is on the same page. That is, that everyone knows what we are talking about here. So we are talking about My English Lab, which is actually an internet platform, an internet site with exercises, with online exercises, games and tests, which are related to, for example, this course book that you know very well and that I know so many of you use for teaching your students grammar, the title of which is Roundup. So Roundup is now accompanied by a set of exercises which are available for the students and for the teachers online, with a set of very, very interesting features, functionalities that are actually the reasons why students who use this kind of solution get considerably better results. What can you find in there? Once you have access to the internet platform, you can find 5 things related to the course book. And these are additional exercises, so exercises that are different from those that you find in the students' books. There are some game-like activities that I'm going to demonstrate to you later. There are some tests, and in levels 4, 5, and 6, there are also special practice tests for OGE and YEGE exams that Masha introduced at the beginning, that were prepared by Anya and Awa from Language.Prosveshcheniye, who are, I think, very well known test authors. So this is what you find inside, and now I would like to explain how it works, because this is the key in terms of this very successful pedagogy that we are talking about here. So as you can see, there are sort of 5 steps to explain how it works, and you can see the little icon or the little figure of the teacher standing next to the blue steps, and then the student standing next to the red steps. So this shows in which steps who is involved. So we will begin at the very top of this slide, where the teacher logs into the platform, and he can choose what he wants to assign to the students. So he can assign exercises, he can assign tests, he can assign practice tests, he can even assign some games. And when they are assigned, the students are notified. So when they log in, they can see what the teacher wants them to do. So they open those exercises, they do them, and when they do them, or as soon as they do them, they get automatic feedback. I'm going to be talking in more detail about it in a couple of minutes. And then as soon as the students get the feedback, the teacher can see who has done the work, who hasn't, and what the results are. And the results can be easily analyzed in the so-called gradebook on the platform, which I'm going to discuss in detail later on as well. And after that, the teacher can plan what to do next, who to work with, who needs more work, who needs some remediation, and who needs some stretch work. And the teacher can assign further work, and this is how this cycle closes. So you assign work, the students do their exercises online so that they can get immediate feedback, and so that you can analyze their results very quickly and decide what you want to do next. So this is how it works, and now I will try to explain why we can talk about 5 ways of uplifting our teaching, or in other words, 5 reasons why our students who use My English Lab actually get better results. You know, the question is sort of, what is technology in a way better at than we are? What can the technology do for us so that the results of our students get better? And here are the responses. Well, first of all, if you think about where your students go after school, there's been some research into it, and it turns out that quite a lot of them, actually, if they live in big cities, they actually go to, would you guess where? Do you know where your students go if they live in a city after work? It may differ from country to country, it may be kind of cultural, but the research that I know, and I think it is about Great Britain, says that the majority of them actually go to the shopping center. But, you know, after that, or sooner or later, they actually go online. They go to the internet. research shows again that young people, teenagers, spend up to 9 hours a day on social platforms. So you can see here how much time they may spend on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook, but they obviously also have quite a lot of other things that they can do with the computer using the internet. So this is where they are. This is what is interesting for them. This is what they like doing. They like spending their time online. So sometimes, I kind of suggest to teachers that homework or the work that we want them to do outside the class should actually kind of follow the students. And when it follows the students, it's got to be where they are, and they are online. And when they go online, they can do these exercises such as the one that you can see on the screen now. I'm sure you recognize the exercise format. In this exercise, they are supposed to find the passive verbs. There are 6 of them. One of them has already been found. Now, if you can see the slide very well, which I hope is the case, can you just tell me if you can see any other passive verbs here? It should be organized, by the way. Can you see any other passive verbs in this square? Choose. So what would the passive be? Expected. Okay. All right. Yeah. So chosen, of course, considered, and so on. Invented. Right. Defeated. Perfect. Thank you. Right. I mean, this is an exercise that your students are likely to enjoy. But there is more, because they can also, from time to time, especially at lower levels, play a game such as this one. It's a memo game. If there's time at the end of the webinar, we will have a go at one of those games. Basically, you can see how many? 16 squares with question marks, and you are supposed to find pairs of words here. So you click on the square, it flips over, and it shows you a picture of, for example, onion. And then you click on another square to flip it over to find the word onion written on it, right? So, and then if you hit the wrong square, they will both flip over again. And the game continues until you find all the pairs. This is the so-called memo game. That's correct. And then they obviously have the practice tests, such as the Ogge and Jäger tests. And what I'm trying to say here is that they are working in this environment here, which is just much more engaging for them than the traditional paper-based environment, because they just like it more. They're used to it. They spend a lot of time there. They expect education to be modern, to be sophisticated, to be enjoyable. So this is the first reason why we think the students' results are better, because they just like working in this way a lot more. Okay, so let's look at another reason why it may be the case. I'm just showing you a typical exercise that you may find within this platform here for Roundup. In this case, it is Roundup 5. And it's an exercise in which you have to decide whether to use the gerund or the infinitive form. So imagine your students get an exercise like this, and then they fill in the gaps. So in the first gap, it's I'm thinking about buying. In the second one, I have decided to make. In the third one, what you can choose, and so on and so forth. I hope you can also see that the student here has made a couple of mistakes. And the most interesting thing is going to happen now. As soon as they fill in this activity, they don't have to wait until the next lesson. until the teacher can correct it. They don't have to look up the answers in the answer key or anything like that, because they have one magic button here, which is called submit. You can see it at the bottom of the slide. And when they hit the submit button, in a couple of seconds, they receive what we call instant feedback. So after a couple of seconds, they already know which of their responses are correct. You can see on this slide that they are in green, and which of their responses are actually wrong. And you can see that these ones are presented in red. And at the top of the screen, the student can see the report for this activity and can see the total score, which in this case is 71%, which is 5 out of 7 items. So the feedback is there, and it is there immediately. It is there instantly. In addition to that, if it so happens that the student makes a couple of mistakes, they can retake this activity, unless it's a test, but you can set it up the way you want to. But I would usually recommend giving your students more than one attempt at taking an activity, so that they can just learn from their mistakes. So when they want to do this exercise again, see what happens. They will retake the activity, but the only items that they actually have to retake are those that they did not do correctly. So would love, this is the one that they have to fill in again, and no problem, would you like, and they have to provide the answer again here. Once they do it, this is the second attempt, they can submit it again, and of course receive instant feedback. And I am 100% convinced that students' results are better when they receive formative instant feedback. There's a lot of research suggesting, proving, arguing that students' results do get better when they get feedback. And at the same time, I know, by being a teacher, that feedback is not always provided. I mean, let's be honest. There are lessons at which we just do not have time to correct our students' homework. We usually have a lot of work to do after lessons, so we don't always collect our students' exercise books to correct their homework. So very often we ask our students to do an activity or an exercise, but it's just physically, in a way, not possible to correct everyone's homework thoroughly. And the system here, the platform here, can do it. It can do it immediately. So the feedback is then provided. It is detailed. It kind of tells them where they can improve, because they can see their mistakes immediately. And it is not received too late. It's not after a week or so when they come to the next lesson, but it's there immediately so that they can learn from it. So please remember that our students do need feedback, and they need a kind of feedback policy. Do you have a feedback policy? I believe you do. We all have some kind of feedback policy, but my English Lab definitely has a very strong, a very powerful, very meaningful feedback policy. And I strongly believe that one of the reasons why the results are better when students use My English Lab is because they get feedback, and because they get this feedback instantly. Okay, but that's not everything. If you look at this slide, maybe from first sight it looks a little bit complicated, but if you take a closer look at it, it's kind of easy to understand what it shows, and I hope it is also easy to understand how important this information on this slide is, this time not just for the student but for the teacher. So this is in fact what we call the gradebook. That is the place on the platform where you can see your students' results. So the results are reported back not only to the students, but they are reported back immediately, instantly to the teachers. So on the left of this slide, you can see the table of contents with all the units from Roundup 5, My English Lab workbook, the exercises and so on. And on the right, you can see the names of the students and their results. So if you look at the second student who is marked with the red frame and the red arrow is pointing at him, you can see the student's result is 57% for this particular assignment, and you can see how it compares to other students in this group, and you can see that it is kind of significantly lower than his colleagues. So you may be interested why this is the case, and My English Lab is so sophisticated that you can actually drill down to this information. So you can now click on this person's name, and this is what you will be able to see. You will be able to see this the exercise the way it was filled in by this particular student. So you can see immediately, and this is at the bottom of the slide now, that this person is having some problems with the gerund and infinitive forms for love, would love, like, would like, and so on. So you can check very quickly and very easily what the problems are for your students. This is why I strongly believe that we can claim that the results are also better because of constant monitoring. Monitoring, which is very important. We don't really want to spy on our students. We just want to be able to help them. And in order to be able to help them, we have to know what their needs are, what their problems are, what their issues are. As soon as we know what the issues are, we are able to provide remediation for them, or if they are very good students and you know their results are already very good, then we will be able to see that as well, and we will be able to provide stretch activities for such students. So whatever the results, as soon as you know them, as soon as you can monitor them, you can make sure that your students get the right portion of remediation or stretch as soon as you get to know their results. So this is the third reason why the students' results are better when they use My English Lab consistently, and if the teacher monitors their work consistently. And please notice how easy it actually is to monitor your students' work. You just log in, you click on the gradebook button, and there is the full picture of what your students have done, what their problems are, what their results are, and in a way, a kind of a suggestion what you should do next. Moving on, let's look at reason number 4. And here I would like you to focus your attention on the button which is kind of highlighted in red, which is visible in the red flame in the frame in the center of the slide. And this button leads us to another very, very powerful tool that we can exploit when we have access to My English Lab. So let me just explain how it works. As soon as your students complete an assignment, and an assignment can be just a single exercise, or your assignment can consist of 2 or 3 or more exercises. Your assignment can consist of a test or a practice test. So later on I'll be showing you how you can actually compile an assignment. But here, as soon as your students have done this assignment, you can click on the Common Error Report button. And the next thing that you will see is actually a very clear report showing what your students are actually having problems with. So in this case, you can see, again, I used those red frames to focus your attention on the most important information in this report. So if you look at the small red frame, you can see that in exercise 3, your students had some problems with the infinitive for the verb to build and building. So you can now go back to this exercise and check what kind of example this was. And you can see in the bigger red frame that the number of students who actually didn't know the correct answer is 5. And you can actually check the names so that you know who needs some more explanations, who needs some more information. Here is the same report, a slightly bigger view to show you how it works, right? So you get to see what the problem is, you get to see the number of students who gave this kind of response, and you can see the names as well. And the mistakes, the problems are arranged here from the most common ones to the least common ones. So if you look at the second one at the bottom of the slide, you can see that it was with too tidy and tidying in exercise 3, and this time 4 students had this kind of problem. So by just looking at the common error report, you can very quickly sort of diagnose what the students' problems are. And speaking of diagnostics, I would just like to tell you that within the platform, you get much more diagnostic information than the data that I have just shown you. So it's not just the results, and it's not just the common error report, but in addition to that, you can also check how much time your students spend using My English Lab, how much time they spend on each activity, which may be, you know, a powerful tool that you may want to use in communication with the parents, for example. You can also have a look at a graph that shows their average scores for different skills. So you can see if your students or if your class is better at reading, or maybe better at grammar, or better at listening, and so on. You can also study the scores of individual students related to each skill. So you can see if a particular student is perhaps better at grammar or at vocabulary, or perhaps is having some problems with reading and listening and so on. So in addition to the gradebook, there's this diagnostics board where you can review a lot of other information. So the fourth reason why the students' results are better is because of informed teaching. We are just very well informed of what the students are actually struggling with. Well, I mean, we're all good teachers, so we know it anyway, because we observe our students, because we interact with our students, because we test our students, but we have more information, additional information, if we give them assignments and then collect the information from those assignments. And this is actually something that we may not have time to do in the traditional environment. But in the online environment, collecting all this information is actually a lot easier. It's a lot quicker, and this is why it's a lot more powerful. Reason number 5 is, well, we want to emphasize here that when you create assignments, you are the designer of the educational experience. What does it mean? Well, this is a light box, a pop-up window which shows what kind of choices you are going to have as a teacher when you want to assign a set of exercises or a test to your students. So if you look at the very first option, general settings, it says, the very first option is to decide how many attempts your students will have at this particular assignment. And I would like to emphasize that when you give your students assignments just to practice what they are learning, for example, a grammatical structure or a set of vocabulary items, I would strongly recommend that you give your students more than one attempt, more than one possibility to do a particular exercise. So this is why in the way I set it up here, I would say activity attempts unlimited. Do it as many times as you want to do it, because when you do it many times, you are very likely to benefit from what I call, and what actually comes from the area of photography, and what I call multiple exposure. Multiple exposure in photography is more or less what you can see in this picture here, is actually when you keep the camera still and then you take several pictures of the same object moving in a very short sequence, and then you may get a result such as this that you can see. So in learning a foreign language, but in learning in general, I believe multiple exposure to a particular piece of material is actually very, very important. So, you know, when students do activities on paper, and I think this is a big difference, when students do activities on paper, they usually do each activity only once. And then, very often, they have to wait until the teacher can actually check what they have done until the next lesson, or maybe until later on during the week or so on. Here, as you know, they get the feedback instantly. And we have observed that a lot of students have this tendency to retake the activity after they get the instant feedback, and when they notice that some of the responses were wrong. And they look at it and say, oh, what did I get wrong here? Oh, it's item number 5. Oh, I can retake it, so I will. And he retakes it and gives it another attempt, and then gets instant feedback and notices that there are still some mistakes. So typically, a student would take it again and again and again. And by doing this, he will just get exposed to a particular structure multiple times. It's a very simple mechanism, but a mechanism which is only available in this online environment, which is hardly available in the traditional paper environment. So this is reason number 5. So if we put it all together, we can see that the students' results are likely to get better because of the 5 reasons. 1, they work in an engaging environment, an environment that they find interesting, engaging, exciting, where they spend a lot of time. Secondly, when they do their exercises online, they can get immediate feedback. And we should never underestimate the power of feedback in general, because research shows that giving your students constructive, the so-called formative feedback, is as strong as giving your students extra months of teaching. There's research which shows how important constructive formative feedback is. Thirdly, and I call this multiple exposure, students do exercises over and over and over again until they actually get them right. which is something really, really useful. There are two other reasons which are important from the teacher's perspective. The results are monitored by the teacher. They are easy to monitor, much more easy to monitor than in the paper environment. So for one thing, it is kind of difficult for the students to actually hide the fact that they, for example, haven't done the homework. So if they haven't done the homework, you will be able to see it immediately in a couple of seconds. As soon as you log in and click on the gradebook, you will see who has done the homework and who hasn't, and what the results are. So reason number 5, if we know the results, if teachers know the results, we can actually monitor the work, but we can also adjust what we do next. We can adjust what we revise, what we pay more attention to, what we ask our students to remediate, or what kind of stretch activities we actually give them. And in addition to those 5 arguments, those 5 reasons, I would like to emphasize some other observations that we have made with students using My English Lab. First of all, students learn to be more accurate when they use My English Lab, and this is the reason for this is that when they type in their answers in My English Lab, they have to make sure that they type them accurately, because if they make a simple spelling mistake, for example, they use the word unless and spell it with single S, they are going to be penalized for it, because the system will not recognize it as a correct answer, and they will not score a point. So, you know, at first, some students kind of complain and they say, oh, you know, I was right, I just misspelled it, but it was a typing mistake, I didn't mean to make it, I know how to spell it. But after a while, they just learn to be a lot more accurate when they write. So that's an additional benefit of using it. Students also kind of learn important life skills. You know how important it is for teenagers to be able to organize their time well, to be able to stick to deadlines. And here, again, the system is kind of merciless. So if you miss your deadline, then you will usually automatically fail or get a 0 for a particular assignment. Of course, I would like to emphasize it here that you can set it up differently. So, for example, if you do not you do not want your students to be penalized for missing the deadline, you can set it up in settings and decide not to take this into consideration. But again, I would say, well, perhaps it is a good idea to use this opportunity to teach our students some life skills such as time management and sticking to deadlines. And last but not least, perhaps, the students actually engage with the content a lot. I told you about the multiple exposure idea, but you know, when they do not agree with the score, with the result, which sometimes happens because maybe they decided to put an alternative answer that the system didn't approve, so then quite often they just write it down, they take it up to the teacher, and they ask questions if the structure is right or if the structure is wrong. And the kind of a hidden benefit of this is that they actually engage with the content a lot more than when they do it on paper. So I think I'm conscious of time. We still have about 13 minutes to go. I would just like to take a quick dive into the system so that you can see it live for about 3 or 5 minutes, and then we can leave 5 or 7 more minutes for questions. So let me rearrange it a little now. I'm going to stop the presentation now, and I'm going to share my screen with you, so you will be able to see the platform live. Okay, can you please tell me if you can see my English lab assignments and events now? Yes, yes, okay. So I hope you are with me. We are inside the platform now. I am logged in as a teacher, and I'm just going to show you what it's like when you get there. So you will have your courses on the left. You will have your gradebook in the very center, and you will also have your settings on the right. I would like to focus your attention on two things, perhaps. First of all, I would like to show you that it is very easy to give your students an assignment. So if you want to assign something to your students, you just go to the Course tab, and as soon as it shows up, you will see the table of contents here on the left. So if you want to assign a set of exercises from Unit 2, you just click on Unit 2, and on the right you can see the exercises which are available in Unit 2. Of course, you don't have to assign them blindly. You can check the content of the exercise by just clicking on it. And as soon as you click on it, a preview of this activity will show up. So you will be able to see what the activity contains. Okay? Then as soon as you realize what is available, you are actually able to assign this material to your students. For this reason, I will just change the course so that we go to a group that is using Roundup 5, because I have enrolled some students here. And for example, if you want to assign exercises from Unit 1, present forms, and you select exercise 1 and exercise 2, you can just hit the assign button, and then you choose the students that you want to assign this work to. In the majority of cases, you will just select all of them, and then you go to the next step where you have to choose the date. Well, I'm going to be a little cruel, and I'm going to ask them to do it today. But of course, if you want to give them more time, you can ask them to do it by the end of tomorrow, and then you go to the next step. Here you can either leave it as is, or you can decide how many attempts you want them to have. I would recommend unlimited number, unless it's a test, of course, because tests are available. And then some other options, such as to show feedback, to show the correct answers, to require correct use of capitalization, and so on. And then you just assign it, and you get a confirmation saying that you have successfully assigned exercises to your students. Okay, and the second thing I wanted to show you from here is the gradebook. You have already seen it on the slides, but here you will be able to see it live. For example, here is the gradebook for my group using Roundup 5, and I can see that the students are not doing very well here. So if I want to see what is wrong with Andrei, I can click on his name, and I will be able to see all the exercises and the results for all the exercises that he has taken. And if I want to know more about the problems, I can go to this particular exercise that he submitted, and I can see what kind of problems he had with this particular activity. Okay, and now I'm going to switch to the student's view. So I am now looking at the student's view. I'm already signed in. I just have to go back to the webinar window. Can you please tell me if you can see the student's view now? Okay, I'm going back. Can you see the student's view? It's assignments and events again. Yes, okay. So I would like you to see here, I have a to-do list as a student. And on this list, I can see all my assignments. I can see that I have something to do for tomorrow. So because time is running and I have some information about the due date repeated here, sorry, here, I just want to do this activity now. So I open it, and after a couple of seconds, I can see that there is this activity for me to do. So I will do it very quickly. Means tidying, remember locking, he goes hiking, I believe. What to do, you will have, let me make a mistake, wash instead of to wash, and it was kind of you, offer instead of to offer. And I'm going to show you live how this is corrected instantly. I just submit it, and I don't even have to wait more than a second to see that my score is 63, 5 out of 8. And here are my correct answers and my wrong answers. So once again, you may remember from our discussion earlier on that I can try it over again. Please remember it's number 4, number 7, and number 8 that I didn't know the correct answers to. So I try it again, 4, 7, and 8. Oh, and there I go. Okay, I just have to fill in those answers when I take the second attempt. Did you remember locking the door? You will have to wash that skirt, and it's really kind of you to offer help. I submit it again, 4, 7, and 8, and oops, there's another mistake here. So I can either try it again, or in this case, I can see the correct answer if I want to. Okay, so this is how it works for the students. Let me just show you one more thing, and I will switch the window to show it to you. I will go to the home page and view all my courses. And for instance, this time Roundup 1, Unit 1, Exercise 4. And you can see that this is actually the memo game. So I started, and I have an alligator here, an eagle there. So it's not a pair. Okay, this is not an eagle, I believe. So I have to keep looking. I wasn't lucky again. Oh, that looks like an eagle. And I think eagle was here. So I have the first pair. I go on and look for an olive now. Oh, I was lucky the first time. So I believe this is an octopus, but not an orange. An orange is here, so I have the next pair, right? And then I have the crocodile or alligator. Oh, that's the one. Okay. And the egg, I believe. No, that was not the egg. Cherry, an egg. You probably remember where the egg was, but I don't. I'll take another attempt. Here is the egg. An apple might be here. No. octopus, I think this is the octopus. Super. And or maybe this is an apple actually. I guess so. Right. So here is the apple and the owl, and the game is over. And I have practiced several words in this game. So this is how it works in levels 4, 5, and 6. You also have access to practice tests. So let me just show you where the tests are. You will find them at the bottom of the table of contents. And if a student wants to practice a test, they can choose from 6 complete practice tests. They consist of all the papers that appear at the exam, including a speaking test and a writing test. These two, writing and speaking, must obviously be corrected by the teacher, but this can be done within the platform. So, in other words, the student can actually record his speaking test and submit it to you, and you will be able to listen to it and to correct it. And then you have the listening test, the reading test, the use of English test. So once again, if you want to look what it is like, here is one of the tasks. It's very much in line with what the students get at the exam. So the instructions and the rubrics are in Russian, and then there is the very task that they have to do in English. In this case, this is the teacher's view, so you can see all the answers, but here is the student's view, and they will have to provide the correct forms of the words here. So, again, I'm really conscious of time, so I know we should be finishing now, and therefore I'm just going back to the presentation mode so that we can finish by looking at this very final slide, which kind of shows the idea of how the pedagogy of My English Lab works. So we believe that it is possible to keep delivering your lessons in class, but then give your students extra practice online for the 5 reasons that we have been discussing today, so that you can then check your students' performance also online, and so that you can tailor your next class to target, for example, the weak areas. So I hope you will give it a try. You will have a go and check how My English Lab works for you, what it can do for you and for your students. And from what we have seen, we can be certain that it can help our students get really better results. So thank you very much for taking part in this webinar. If you have any questions, or if there have been any questions that I have not noticed in the chat box as I was speaking, perhaps you can retype them so that I can answer them now. I can see some questions in Russian, and I can see some comments in Russian. I can read some of them, but I'm not sure if I can understand all of them. Does the book include grammar explanation? Well, if you know Roundup, it does include some grammar explanation, but My English Lab contains exercises only. Several attempts. Does the teacher see attempt results? Well, set up the grade book and see the different attempts, but you have to decide which attempt you want to see, the first one or the last one, for example. Is there an ebook? No, there isn't an ebook available for Roundup at the moment, but there is this powerful set of online exercises. Are the exercises the same in the course book and on the platform? Yes, Natalia, this is a very good question, but the answer is no. The exercises are different. The exercises which you find in the on the platform are actually those exercises, or the majority of them anyway, which used to be available on the CD-ROMs. So in the past, Roundup would be available with CD-ROMs. Now it's mostly available with My English Lab. So we put the exercises from the CD-ROMs into My English Lab so that the students can get all the benefits of using My English Lab with it. Okay, so thank you very much, everyone. Have a nice afternoon, and I hope you will be happy with My English Lab.